In the unimaginably quiet depths of interstellar space, far beyond the familiar glow of our sun, something appeared to move. It wasn't drifting like a fragment of shattered rock. It wasn't following the graceful path of a comet. And it didn't behave like ordinary space debris. Its movement seemed deliberate. The strange detection came from an unlikely source. Voyager 2, a spacecraft launched more than 4 decades ago, now traveling through the thin darkness between the stars. Built with technology from another era, Voyager was never designed to investigate mysteries like this. Yet one of its aging instruments appeared to register something that shouldn't have been there. At first, the data looked insignificant. A weak low-frequency disturbance. Then came subtle variations in intensity, changes in direction, and a pattern that appeared to persist instead of fading away. The truly unsettling detail was its location. Voyager 2 was operating beyond the heliosphere in interstellar space. This region is incredibly sparse, with matter spread so thinly that the environment seems almost empty compared with the space closer to the Sun. There should have been very little capable of producing such a structured signal. Researchers began eliminating ordinary possibilities. There was no obvious comet nearby. No known asteroid field. No conventional explanation for repeated directional changes. The more closely the telemetry was examined, the stranger the behavior appeared. The signal seemed to shift whenever Voyager's own orientation changed. That could potentially be explained by an interaction between the spacecraft and its surrounding environment. But it also raised a much more provocative possibility. What if something was reacting to Voyager? That idea remains speculation, but the apparent relationship between the measurements immediately made the anomaly more difficult to explain. The mysterious source also seemed to change its motion without producing an obvious trail of exhaust, radiation, or other signatures normally associated with propulsion. No chemical engine would make sense in such an environment. Solar propulsion would be extremely difficult so far from the Sun. Even an advanced nuclear-powered system should leave some detectable evidence. Yet the object appeared to change direction while leaving almost nothing behind. Then researchers noticed another unusual characteristic. The signal wasn't simply fluctuating randomly. Its bursts seemed separated by intervals. Energy appeared, disappeared, and returned again with subtle differences between events. The pattern was tantalizingly structured, almost like a transmission. Almost. And that distinction matters. Natural phenomena can produce surprisingly organized signals. Plasma waves, magnetic fields, turbulence, and interactions between charged particles can all generate patterns that initially look artificial. So the appearance of structure alone doesn't prove intelligence. But it was enough to raise an uncomfortable question. What if the source wasn't simply moving through space? What if it was doing something? The speculation quickly became more extreme. Some imagined an ancient machine drifting between stars, a dormant artifact that had survived for an unimaginable amount of time. Others suggested a highly advanced reconnaissance system capable of observing its surroundings without revealing itself. But there was another possibility that was much less extraordinary. Perhaps Voyager had encountered an unusual plasma structure, a region of electrically charged material interacting with magnetic fields in a way scientists had never directly observed. Even that explanation would be remarkable. Because if a natural structure could repeatedly adapt to its electromagnetic surroundings in such a precise way, it would force researchers to reconsider how complex interstellar plasma behavior can become. Then there was the question of location. Voyager 2 is traveling through the local interstellar environment, an area where particles are incredibly scarce compared with the regions around Earth. For something to produce measurable movement there, it would need either an energy source, an interaction with the surrounding medium, or some mechanism that we don't yet understand. And the reported path made the mystery even more intriguing. Instead of following a perfectly predictable trajectory, the anomaly appeared to curve and change speed in ways that resembled small course adjustments. If that interpretation were correct, random turbulence would become a less satisfying explanation. Researchers began considering whether Voyager might have passed through a larger region of disturbed space. Imagine an invisible field spread across a portion of interstellar space. Voyager enters it, its instruments react, and somewhere nearby another process is triggered. In that scenario, the spacecraft wouldn't necessarily have discovered a moving object at all. It could have crossed into an environment capable of producing the unusual readings. And that possibility becomes even more interesting when the signal structure is examined. Repeated intervals appeared in the data, with some clusters showing numerical relationships that seemed unusually organized. At first, such patterns could easily be dismissed as coincidence. That would be the responsible scientific approach. But after more sophisticated signal analysis, researchers might search for harmonics, repetition, and correlations that distinguish environmental noise from an actual transmission. If a pattern survived those tests, it would become much more difficult to dismiss. Still, there's a major difference between a structured signal and an intelligent one. Nature produces patterns all the time. The real question would be whether the anomaly contains information that cannot reasonably be explained by known physical processes. That is where the mystery becomes truly fascinating. Because if an object were actually adjusting its movement according to the presence of Voyager, we would need to understand the mechanism responsible. There is currently no confirmed evidence that such a thing is happening. But the possibility is enough to make the fictional scenario disturbing. And then an even stranger idea emerges. What if this wasn't the first time? When scientists compare unusual measurements across different deep space missions, they sometimes find old anomalies that were previously attributed to instrumentation errors, radiation, communication problems, or environmental interference. Voyager isn't the only spacecraft to have produced puzzling data. Other missions, including New Horizons and earlier probes, have encountered unusual telemetry and trajectory measurements that have generated scientific discussion. Most of these events ultimately have conventional explanations. But imagine discovering that several apparently unrelated anomalies occurred in roughly the same region of space. Suddenly, old data might deserve another look.